this is class warfare. That's all it is. It's basically people who own the means of production, or in this case, own the means of survival, which is housing. And then they're saying, well, you need to come up with the money to pay me, and I can charge you no matter what with impunity. I can go as high as I want to. And if you don't like it, well, then live out on the street. This is going to be a very interesting one because, when I saw this story, shout out to Roger Meadows, I was just like, wait, what? Let's get into this one. All right. So there's an article that was brought out that I would like to share. And this really just goes into why I am not a fan of landlords. And you all know this. You guys know me. I'm not a fan of landlords. Never have been, never will be, actually. Because ultimately it's about holding back people from having their own. And it's just like workers need to own the means of production. Workers also need to have their own homes. So let's get into this. This is out of The Gothamist. It says more than 13,000 rent-stabilized units in New York City are sitting empty for multiple years, report finds. So we're going to be talking about this. This is actually going to be very interesting. This is out of New York. So it starts, it says more than 13,000 rent-stabilized apartments sat empty over the past 2 years amid a heated debate over warehousing low-cost units, according to new review of state data. Tenant organizations, landlord groups, and policymakers have been trying to determine the exact number of empty rent-stabilized units in New York as the city contends with a dire housing shortage, surging homelessness, and record-breaking rents. The city's independent budget office reviewed state data and found that the number of empty rent-stabilized apartments decreased significantly from 2021 to 2022, following a pandemic-related exodus from Manhattan. Landlords listed 42,275 rent-stabilized apartments as of April 1st of last year, with most of those apartments marked as newly vacant, the IBO said. The agency said 13,362 units sat empty for at least 2 consecutive years, up from 12,300 in 2021, suggesting that they were vacant for reasons other than routine movement of tenants. No shit, Sherlock. So why in the hell are they doing this? Why are landlords making these apartments sit vacant? What's the point? Because if they're rent control and they're sitting vacant, are you not making money? It seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? Well, let's get into this even more. There's actually a gentleman, I'll say that is actually talking about this from more of the landlord perspective. But he actually gives the answer, and it's really more, I don't think he means to make it sound nefarious, but it does. So let me go to this. Let's go to this. And I'm not going to share this entire video, but, I would like to start off. And here's what he says. Okay, let's go past the intro. All right.
Block of building in the East Village, and 4 of those apartments are vacant and have been vacant for over 5 years. Let's count them. Vacant, 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 vacant. All right, why is that? So essentially, a law was passed in 2017 for affordable rent, which I'm all for. Seriously, we all need a place to live. And essentially, so when someone moves out of a rent-stabilized unit, you cannot increase the price anymore. So in my building, there's an 85-year-old guy. He dies. The landlord can't increase the rent, doesn't renovate the apartment, and they're betting the...
Hold up. First of all, doesn't this guy look like Jerry from Liar Liar? Oh, here's the claw. Here's the claw. You're scared of the claw. You're scared of the claw. Doesn't he look like Jerry from Liar Liar? The boyfriend? He looks like him to me for some reason. Oh my goodness. This is sorry. Let's continue. Sorry. I just made an observation. Anywho.
Doesn't renovate the apartment, and they're betting the law is going to change back. So it just sits vacant, taking an apartment away from a New Yorker. And just in the East Village, I know for a fact, there's over 4,000 vacant apartments. What's your take?
All right, so I shouldn't have to say anything about rent control. I've been going over rent control for a while now, and I think I've brought up almost every single one of the points of why it does not work, okay? It disincentivizes people from wanting to actually rent their properties out, and actually, because of that, the number of affordable housing units decreases. Now, the 2019 rent stabilization law, what it did was it took away the ability for the landlords to actually raise rent between tenants, so they can make improvements, raise rents up, and, recover some of the costs that were associated with the improvements that they made. So,
why is he wrong? Go ahead in the chat, in the comments, tell me why is he wrong? Now, I'm going to tell you why I think he's wrong. Let's go. So he said that keeping rent stabilized disincentivizes landlords from renting apartments and recovering the funds so that it improves units and raises rents, and they raise rents to recover the costs. Never mind that landlords are just scalpers that are the middlemen that gatekeep housing from people. If the goal is to raise rents in the first place, then why get rid of rate stabilization? If you get rid of rent control, rent goes up. If you keep rent control, rent goes up. To me, the solution is just to get rid of the middleman. Get rid of landlords. That's my solution, right? But he would probably disagree with that. Let's continue.
So without that incentive, a lot of landlords are just saying to themselves, well, we're not going to make those improvements. We're not even going to rent these units. We're just going to leave them vacant. So like I said before, if you disincentivize landlords from, wanting to rent their units out, that will lead to a further affordable housing shortage and make it harder for tenants overall. The cost will skyrocket in those units that are not rent controlled, okay? And this is exactly what we're seeing in New York right now.
This sounds like they're holding housing and housing units hostage in order to raise rents with impunity, right? This is why I call this a hostage situation. They're basically holding the hostage because they can't make more profits. If that's the case, then why don't they put on their adult underwear and get a real job? This is basically greed. And so, thank you so much for coming, sir. But yeah, that is crazy on his face, because either way you look at it, rents are going up anyway. So if we stabilize the rents, you guys are going to have a hissy fit and go, I want to raise prices higher so that I can make as much money as possible, even though I already have a house. Let me gatekeep housing. That's what it's like. Just a bunch of babies whining and taking their ball and going home because they can't scalp people who need homes. That's basically what it is. Now, a lot of people may disagree, but I think you're wrong. But you can disagree all you want. But here's the thing. Houses are meant to live in. If you're a landlord, that's not a job. That's basically it. It's not a job. All right, so I have a video that I would like to share. And you're going to see that Jerry looking guy again. And there's going to be a reply from somebody who thinks more along the lines of myself. So let's go. You're scared of the claw. Here's the claw.
Okay, so I'm essentially a retired real estate broker.
And I'm a socialist who helped pass those laws in 2019. And there's a level of analysis missing from this guy's TikTok. The law itself had some pretty common sense protections, like restricting the amount that a landlord could charge for an application fee so they couldn't just pocket the money. And the laws provided stronger protections for tenants so landlords couldn't just harass people out of their apartments that were rent stabilized or rent controlled and then renovate them and flip them onto the market for a much higher rent. And if you notice, the guy's talking about how there are all these vacant apartments, right? We're supposed to be in a housing crisis here in New York City. But the fact is that there's so much inventory that landlords aren't willing to release simply because they think that they can get more money for it if the laws were to change.
So this is one of the points that I want to make. This is why when people say that, oh my gosh, housing is, we just need more affordable housing. No, we don't. So here's my problem. This is basically like saying to a hungry family, oh, we just need cheaper food. When in reality, you're sitting there homeless and hungry behind a glass, and you have this banquet table full of food, and you have just one, maybe two people sitting at the table, and they're holding that food back from you, and then they're saying, well, all you need to do is just get more cheaper food for yourself, when in reality, there's all that food that's there that's available for them. How is that fair? You're not even going to be able to finish all that food. And yet you're going to hold people back from having some? That sounds sociopathic to me. It's wild, man. We don't need more affordable housing. We just need to give the housing to people who need it. Continue.
Landlords are holding New Yorkers hostage right now. The solution is not giving into landlord greed. It's doing things like building more social housing and passing things like good cause eviction so we can all afford to live here.
So right on from that gentleman. And so I think that it is a hostage situation that really needs to be mitigated through laws. And so this is why it is important for us to fight the system as much as we possibly can so that people aren't suffering as much, because ultimately, who is perpetuating this disaster? It is really the greed of landlords. That's basically it. So let me share this as well. Here he goes, saying something that is outdated. So let's continue. This young lady, she actually corrects him.
There are nearly 100,000 vacant apartments in New York City. In 2019, a Tenant Protection Act.
This creator has been spreading so much misinformation about the 2019 Tenant Protection Act. Just want to set the record straight on several things because it's getting fucking annoying at this point. First and foremost, he's been starting with this headline that there are 100,000 vacant apartments in New York City. As of April 2022, there were only 38,000 vacant rent-stabilized units, which is the only type of apartments that this law applies to when it comes to what he's talking about. Source. 2. His argument is around major capital improvements, which are essentially when a landlord needs to make renovations to an apartment, how much money can they then charge the incoming tenant or current tenant for those improvements that they need to make. This includes things like making sure there's heat, hot water, electricity, paint, pretty typical stuff that landlords should expect to have to pay for. Prior to the 2019 law, when a unit was vacant and a landlord had a major capital improvement, they could increase the rent up to 20%. The law changed that rate to 2% maximum.
So imagine if you imagine having an apartment and you move out and you move to a different apartment. And the apartment that you're moving into, the prior tenant was paying $1,000. Now, since you're a new tenant moving into that same apartment, the landlord is now charging $1,200. Never mind that they made profit off the $1,000 already, but now they're raising the rent even more. And they're saying, well, it's to make improvements to the apartment. We want to improve the apartment. When, number one, y'all should have saved up for that. Number two, as far as fixing all the wear and tear, as long as, if the wear and tear is beyond the pale, then this is what happens when you keep the security deposit. But if it's just normal wear and tear, well, that's part of the cost of business, right? And then they want to raise it to $1,200. But then after you move, then they're going to raise it another 20%, which means that the apartment is going to go up to $1,450. So there's going to be another 20% and another 20% and another 20%. And if they can keep people circulating instead of staying there, then that means that they can bump up rents super fast over a short period of a few years. So this is why some of them are like, well, if I have a 6-month lease, then I can turn out 2 people a year versus a year lease. And this is just a money-making scam in my eyes.
Which, don't get me wrong, I don't think that that's the right number, but I don't think that that supports the argument that this creator is trying to make. That leaves me to 3. The 2019 Act had so many protections for tenants that are really important, and this creator is just glazing over them. These include things like a cap to how much a landlord could ask for a deposit, a cap to how much they could ask for a rental application, and increased protections for rent-stabilized units, which leads me to...
And you know what's funny? I had no idea in New York you pay brokerage fees. Brokerage fees? I can't even say it right. Brokerage fees. That is crazy. Like, I never heard of it. I'm like, what in the hell is a brokerage fee? I live in Florida. We don't have no damn brokerage fees. Like, look, it is deposit, first month, application fee. That's it. That's all. That's all we got here in Florida. And you mean to tell me y'all got to do first, last, make 3 times the rent, brokerage fees, all that? I'm like, what in the world? What are y'all doing up there? How do you survive, man? It's crazy, bro. This is ridiculous. That's New York?
Point number 4. This creator failed to mention a very important component of the 2019 Act that left a lot of landlords really pissed off. This was the change, or rather elimination, of a high rent vacancy, which was essentially when an apartment was over $2,700 a month market rate, and or the renter was making more than $200,000 and it was vacant for more than a month, the apartment could be destabilized, as in taken completely out of rent stabilization, and the landlord could then post it at a market rate. Since rent stabilization laws went into effect in 1993, over 150,000 units have been deregulated because of this law. Source. Those 150,000 units that were deregulated are in addition to 130,000 units that were deregulated for other reasons. But regardless of what part of the 2019 Act this creator wants to complain about, at the end of the day, his argument is null and void because, according to the 2021 Housing and Vacancy Survey, the vacancy rate of market rate units and rent stabilized units both hovered around 4.5%. So this creator's idea that rent stabilized units are so much harder to fill for these landlords is just absolutely ridiculous. Please stop spreading misinformation, especially when it's...
So yeah, you gotta be careful with some of these creators, especially the ones that are landlords, because they'll try to make it seem like they're suffering during a press group. Oh my God, they're trying to take over the renters. When in reality, it's never been a system that's been for us, ever. That's like the whole reverse racism argument. Oh gosh. And this is class warfare. That's all it is. It's basically people who own the means of production, or in this case, own the means of survival, which is housing. And then they're saying, well, you need to come up with the money to pay me, and I can charge you no matter what. With impunity, I can go as high as I want to, and if you don't like it, well, then live out on the street. And it's not that they have their own home, but they have multiple homes, which they basically scalp and say, okay, you have to pay me whatever I say I want, and then you guys can have housing. But then when we actually speak out and then make it so that they can't do whatever they want, then that's when they go, no, we're being oppressed. When in reality, they were oppressing us by gatekeeping housing in the first place. Landlords are an antiquated, unnecessary institution that needs to go away. Burn it with fire. Burn it with fire and make it go away, because this institution sucks. So, in my final thoughts, it says this is why we need real housing for all. Making sure that private equity like Blackstone can't own housing and raising rents on units and houses makes us a nation of renters and turns us into a more depressed underclass. Citizen ballot initiatives can be a defense against this, since it goes around the politicians and pushes the choice in the hands of the people. Until we can get rid of landlords, we must do what we can to defend against their parasitic tactics to leech off of workers. And that's it. So I am going to head into the chat really quick. And if you guys have not, then make sure to give the stream a like as well. Let's go to the chat. Starting off at Rockfin. All right. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin Roger. He shares a link. Says Queens is the 13th most expensive, and Long Island's Nassau County, where I live, is the 15th. This is out of a link from timeout.com. And I'll share that really quick just to read the title. Thank you so very much for that, Roger. It says Manhattan is the most expensive place to live in the United States. It says the cost of living is more than double the national average, according to the Council for Community and Economic Research's Cost of Living Index. So, yeah. And that's the problem, is that they have made rents go up over the last 30 years. They have been building upon over and over and over. 20%. All right. Move the next person out. 20% more. Move the person in, then move them out. Charge 20% more. Move them in, move them out. Charge 20% more, and on and on and on, until next thing you know, you have from $500 a rent to like $4,000 rent, and then it's only been like 10 to 15 years. And then you're sitting there going, well, why did rents go up so high? Well, because you have greedy ass landlords that don't have rent stabilization. And then when you try to put in rent stabilization, they have a hissy fit, and then they don't want to rent out to nobody. And now they're just waiting for the laws to change so that they can charge with impunity how much they want, thus causing a housing crisis. And because they're making the housing stock so small because they're no longer renting, that means that the other people who are renting can upcharge their rents even higher. It's artificially inflating rents when we actually have enough housing stock. It is crazy, crazy, crazy.